All right, I am Soroush Khanlou, and I'm the lead developer on Amal and Heritage. Good afternoon. My colleague Andres Acosta will be joining me here in a few minutes, but our goal today is to give you an idea of who we are and what we've been working on. Naturally, we wouldn't be where we are without the institutions and organizations that have helped support us. And those institutions are, of course, the Global Heritage Fund, which is the primary backer, the Prince, one moment. No, I've almost got it, sorry. I think so. Have I almost got it? This is here. This is, okay. Sorry, my notes still aren't there. All right, we should be good. All right, apologies. We wouldn't be where we are without the support from the organizations and institutions that make Amal possible. Those organizations include the Global Heritage Fund, which is the primary backer of Amal, as well as the Prince Claus Fund, ICORP, ICOMOS, and UNESCO. So to start, many of you know who we are, but we'd like to give a brief primer for those who don't. We'd like to talk about what Amal is. While a lot of the other presenters have focused on highly specialized hardware, such as LiDAR or satellite mapping, drones, and other such tools, we at Amal are focused on the lower end of the market. There's a device that almost every one of us carries with us, and it has a wide array of sensors and communication technologies, and it can be used to do effective archaeology. So what we do is we take a design-focused approach to app development, ensuring that we're inclusive of all of the people who are experts in the field, as well as those who are not experts in the field. What Amal is a set of tools and a training program designed for use during disasters. By using the features of the mobile devices that we all carry around, features like the camera, like the GPS and the compass, and intuitive interfaces that we can build, we can replace traditional pen and paper techniques to make data collection faster, less error-prone, and better for groups of teams. So this is how we look at the work that we do. We call this the disaster management cycle. Previously, we were more focused on the left half of this cycle, post-disaster, working on rapid impact assessment after an incident. However, there's also a strong need for pre-disaster mobile tools. In a world with barbaric conflict and disastrous climate change, as we saw in the presentation before, these things are more important than ever. The Amal program starts from the top right of this cycle with training programs and capacity building for areas that are sort of pre-incident, and then tools for documenting the disaster rapidly and enabling a quick response and a smooth recovery. You heard from David and Salima earlier. They're working with local communities in the Moroccan regions to document and preserve the historic granaries that are there. The process of desertification in Morocco is a slow disaster, but a disaster nonetheless. And documenting the current state of those granaries is one way to stem that tide. We have been talking to Salima and David, and we call them our super users. We stay very close with them, making sure that we build the features that they need so that we can stay in contact with the people who use our software, and we can make sure that our software is useful for those who are using it in the field. So that's sort of what Amal is, but why do we think it's important? Here's an example of a team using traditional pen and paper techniques. These techniques for recording and gathering data are a little bit slower, a little bit more expensive, and in an emergency situation, you really need the most rapid assessment of the situation as possible. So digital documentation being a theme of this conference, we need to look at why do we like these digital tools? Why do we like mobile technology? Here's an example of a phone and a clipboard. When we look at what paper is good at versus what paper is bad at, we see that in a lot of the cases where paper suffers, mobile can really help us. So for example, if you're in the field with a clipboard, you're going to need a separate device as a GPS and a separate device as a camera. Whereas something like a mobile device, all of those things are all in one. Users that don't necessarily own a GPS probably own a mobile telephone. Not only do you have to own these devices, you also have to carry them with you, which can be a little bit cumbersome. Again, with the mobile device, it's all in one, so you don't have to carry 3 things, you only have to carry 1 thing. When you have the data on the phone, it's immediately ready to be transmitted anywhere it needs to go. As long as you have cellular reception or Wi-Fi reception, you can send the data anywhere it needs to go. Paper requires a trip back to the office, perhaps you're scanning it or faxing it, and that adds to the process. Likewise, also copying it is a bit of a challenge. With mobile devices and electronic technology, you can immediately copy things and have them be anywhere they need to be, whereas with paper and clipboard techniques, you need to copy them using a copy machine, probably back at the office. So our goal here is really not to get rid of the clipboard. Pen and paper still has lots of advantages. For example, paper doesn't run out of batteries. You can read paper in the sun. Paper doesn't overheat. But we want to be able to balance all of the positives of the new technology with all the positives of the old technology and make sure that we balance that trade-off and make something that's useful for everyone. Lastly, working with paper, a little bit harder to edit, especially if you need to insert words. Computers make that a little bit easier. So a lot of you were at the Protecting the Past conference in Tunisia last year, and you want to know what we've been up to for the last year. So we've been working on a number of things. We've sort of set a roadmap for ourselves of where we want to take the product of Amal in the future. The roadmap is essentially 3 phases, versions 1, 2, and 3. Version 1 is where we are now. That's sort of Amal for individuals. That's data collection on the device. That's the ability to capture images. That's the ability to create reports, edit them from the desktop once you're back at the office. But then once that's done, once we built that, we realized there was actually a bit of a hole in the product. And what we realized was that when you're in the field with a team, these phones really need to be able to communicate together. If you've already assessed something, your teammate also doesn't need to go and assess it. If your teammate is documenting safety hazards, you need to know that those safety hazards are there. And so building a product where each device communicates with every other device is extremely important. So that's where we want to go with version 2 of Amal. Version 3 of Amal, we call Amal for organizations. This involves project-based features so that, once you've assessed a region once, perhaps you're going to assess it multiple times, and those multiple assessments become a project, and they represent a sort of organization-level approach to the area that you're assessing. So that's sort of our broad vision for where we want things to go. Now for a little bit of concrete details. One thing we've been working a lot on is Android. Android is hugely important for this region, as I'm sure you all know. Even the Google blog for Android developers says that 75% of the smartphones in this region are Android phones. So 75% is a huge, huge number, and it's very valuable for us to make sure that we're on that platform and working with it. However, working with Android is a little bit challenging. There's many different manufacturers. As you can see, many screen sizes. Each manufacturer has its own camera. There are also many versions of the operating system. Our job is to make sure that we have one application that works in every single one of those environments. Now, that's a challenge, but that's something that we've been able to overcome with what we call a test lab. A test lab is a large number of Android devices that we can use to run our app on to make sure that different manufacturers, different cameras, and different operating systems all work smoothly. We've also, in the last year, been relying on the rest of the software development community to help us solve really hard problems like making sure the camera works well for everybody. We're proud this year to report that our Android app has come a long way. Back in Tunisia, we really only had a beta with the bare number of features. Now we've rewritten the camera to support a lot more devices. We've added a lot more of the features that our users expect, and we fixed a lot of bugs that only happen on certain devices from certain manufacturers. And we've done one more thing as well. I know this chart is a little bit hard to read, but this is each Android version that Google releases is represented here by one color. So we are all the way at the end. That's the last survey was February 2018. And the app that we had ready in Tunisia only covered the purple and the pink parts. So it's still more than half, which is not bad. But we're going to do a little bit better than that. Here's the same data in tabular form. You can see that these later versions are about 50%, a little more, 55%. But we've actually dropped the requirements so that our app will run on more phones. So if you have an older phone, Amal is more likely to work on your phone. And what that means is when you look at this graph, we now cover everything up to the bright red. So that's almost 95% of devices. So that's really great. So that's our update on Android. We also have a partnership that we'd like to talk a little bit about. We call this Hairbridge. Hairbridge is a partnership with EMENA, between Global Heritage Fund and EMENA. And what Hairbridge is it's a way for users in the field, often lay people, to collect information on sites where EMENA is unsure if it's an archaeological site or not. And they can send people who live on the ground and have them upload photos to Hairbridge and then check those photos in order to see if they're valuable, and if they are valuable and prove the existence of an archaeological site, then they can include that in the EMENA database. So they can guide the user through installing the app, having it load, capturing data, uploading data, and then from the EMENA side, a staff user can come into Hairbridge. They can log in, and they'll see all the data associated with a specific EMENA resource, and then eventually submit that, and basically they'll have access to that data. This helps build confidence in the data that EMENA is looking at, because when you're looking from a satellite, you don't always know for sure what you're looking at, and this can help with that confidence. So we believe that Hairbridge and Amal are going to be valuable tools for EMENA, and we look forward to working with them more in the future. We're very proud of this collaboration, and in particular, I'd like to thank Andrea, who's sitting in the back there, who helped spearhead this project from the EMENA side. If you have a similar project where you think you could benefit from data capture from mobile tools in your regions that you're particularly interested in, we would love to talk to you. We think Amal does a really great job in situations like this. I'd now like to invite my colleague Andres Acosta on stage to talk a little bit about user safety in the Amal program.
Thank you, Soroush. All right. Following the last Protecting the Past conference, we had two priorities. One was obviously the shift to a real strong focus on Android. I'm happy to say I'm no longer an iPhone owner. I am an Android phone owner. The other fact is that we understood that safety was a very, very important concern, especially dealing with rapid impact assessment and the whole disaster management wheel. So it's something that we not only took a strong look at, we actually went even further. We actually worked directly with first responders in San Francisco, but also thinking much broad-minded about how we would approach any situation and learn from the first responses' take on safety. And one of the things that we discovered was a community emergency response team program. This program enabled us to be able to look at responding to a disaster from a community's perspective. How would they support first responders? How could we actually do it and not endanger the lives of these supporters? So one of the things that I did in response to that program was I actually went through about a 4-month process of getting certified and going day by day and going through a number of exercises, and with a particular focus on documentation, but then also safety. So as you see from this photo, it was very hands-on, and we were able to get a lot of learnings from the program. The program also did make extensive use of paper, forms, and clipboards. So that was something that was somewhat surprising, but then at the same time, looking at it from the heritage perspective, I found a lot of learnings from that. One thing in particular was that there was this magical form, and it was a form called Form 100. And essentially, this form is a blank piece of paper. So when we could not fill out something on this form, we could always write it down on our own. And I can't tell you how helpful this was in terms of taking the learnings back to Amal and trying to implement some of those features with our preset forms. So this is something that we are going to be building upon and making, especially for when you're doing assessments in hazardous situations. It's very empowering to be able to have the option of adding something that maybe doesn't fit within the preset guidelines of that form. The other thing, too, the big learning that we took away from this program was that certs don't get hurt. And you know what? I think I'm going to take this same exact phrase and say that Amal users don't get hurt. I really want to make sure that we're not putting people in unnecessary danger, and a series of features that we have coming in Amal 2.0 and Amal 3.0 for organizations are going to address these. The other thing is certs are volunteer. They don't get paid. So after I finished the certification, I said, well, I had a number of notes, much more than I can cover in a short talk, but these are just a few of the things that we implemented. Number one thing is, before going into any disaster scenario, any situation for that matter, even pre-disaster, you need to check before you go. You need to be able to look at the tools that you have, at the hazards in front of you, and make a determination as to whether you're just going to take a photo from afar or go inside. And it's very important that training is imperative in that thing, to be able to address whether something is dangerous or not. And to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I've seen, a lot of the photos that I've seen of people assessing heritage sites, oftentimes you see that there are a number of dangers there, and you want to make sure that people understand how to evaluate those risks before going in. And we're going to help with that. We have a number of user guides that can help with assessing and hazardous situations before going in, and that's something that will be accessible to everyone who uses Amal. The other thing is teams of 2. I had always known that it was recommended to have teams of 2. I never knew it was mandatory. So this is something that there's a structure in terms of how to work with small teams, and teams of 2 are really the golden ratio when it comes to actually going in and having a safe assessment versus a potentially unsafe one. So some of the features we're evolving in Amal 2.0 is a number of features that will really unlock with 2 people assessing rather than 1, and also making it mandatory to have a watcher and somebody who's a keeper. So somebody who's a safety watcher and the other person who's a record keeper. And the last is addressing safety first and safety later. So when safety is addressed last, it will make sure that if there is any incident, any safety incident that happens in your report, that is documented, and that every Amal user can learn from that and can make sure that it actually is something that everyone can adopt later. So in closing, after this session, after the coffee break, please join us at the Digital Documentation Showcase, where we have Amal for web, we have Amal mobile, and we also have Hairbridge, which Soroush presented on. So please come over, bring your questions. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. Thank you for your time.